Hello everyone, welcome back to Asturis in City Skylines. Today we are going to play with sand a lot, but first a little recap. The main transportation hub is almost done. Just one little corner needs some polishing, but the main entrance to the main hall is done and both flying train paths are done with their own stations on top of buildings. Next, we did the bay project with some boats, ferries, and tropical details, which is something we will continue today. We will move along the coastline and build a larger beach, which will have a tram line running in the sand. We will play with some terrain changes for more natural details and introduce some really cool, unique buildings. Let's go. It's a bit unusual for Asturis, but this project did have a real-life inspiration, but not from any tropical areas, but from Belgium, surprisingly enough, because there is a tram line running along the Belgian coastline that is running very close to the sea, to the beaches, that it creates very unique looking scenery, and even in some cases you might find pictures where the beach sand gets blown into the tracks, and it's really creating something interesting that I wanted to experiment with in Asturis as well. So in this position on the map, we have a perfect place for it because we already have the coastline tracks, we already defined those, we know that they will run into this area. There is also the second line that is going from the park area, I think we did that last time, and there are also going to be some other lines converging into this area. Later it's kind of going to be an important hub, but that's going to be for some later episodes. Right now we're just going to do the beach and some buildings around it. So we also need to do some kind of landscaping, and we really need to pay attention to how the entire beach area is going to look, because of course the beach is just going to be that, I'm just going to paint it with sand and I'm going to be done with it mostly, but the entire place is also, or most importantly, going to stand out with all the things behind it, right? So we need to play with the landscaping so that we are going to create some reasonable slope. We don't really have that. This place is mostly flat, and there is also that main road that kind of goes along the coastline, kind of straight from that roundabout center area. And we also need to do something with that. So we will go there and do some kind of like a higher terrain so that it goes more steeply down to the beaches. We will have some opportunity for some rocks and all of that. Now, before I do that, in the time lapse, we are just going to do some, slight detailing with this tram stop, because I really want to pay attention to these tram stops. They are going to be very prominent in this area, and I want to make them blend well with this, like a sandy, tropical, a bit more chill place, right? So I'm going to use pretty much exactly the same style that I did on that little island. It makes sense, it's the same track, it's the same line, so it can follow the same style as well. And this particular style of the tram stops I really like. So I'm using those tracks that I prepared for the tram station terminal, episode 3 or 4 or something, and I'm just detailing it completely. So doing this gravel as like a walkable surface, in the station area, and these boardwalks on the sides as the platforms. So using the invisible roads on the sides of them so that we don't have those like semicircular ends of these roads or any kind of thing. So I'm basically just using them as decorations. Also using the same railing as on the island, and in here we are going to do like little ramps into the beach area, right? So that people can immediately go and enjoy the sea, enjoy the water, right? Now, on the other side of this tram stop, I'm going to do something similar, although it is already going to be connected to some sort of like a plaza. I wasn't exactly sure about it at this point, but it's going to be like a gravel plaza. I'm going to try to make it a bit more natural looking, because I really do want to blend this area into more, natural looking details. Now, this is the first unique building that I'm going to place here. And this building, I was already 100% sure that it's going to go here immediately after I placed that La Défense building, the shorter one on the side of the bay. I'm not exactly sure what's the name of this tall building. It's from Tokyo. I'm sure if you're going to type in Tokyo into the workshop, you're going to find it. It's, you cannot miss it. It looks, very distinct in the thumbnails as well. And it has a very favorable angle of the building, so it exactly matches the La Défense building, and puts the tower like facing the bay, facing the space elevator in a really, really nice way. And those lower parts of that building are going to create some kind of like definings of like edges of like streets or blocks inside or something like that. So that place around that building is probably going to be walkable. When I'm making this commentary, the new DLC came out, so maybe I could play around with some of that functionality, but we will see. Now, the next unique building that I was not planning, but fits this place just perfectly, is that Galaxy Soho building. I'm not exactly sure how it's called. I do believe that it's made by Luminu. And again, you are easily going to just find it in the workshop if you type in Soho, I believe. And I had to convert it into procedural object, this one, because I wanted to make it slightly darker. But most importantly, it's gonna be in a sloped area already. So I kind of want it to be so that it naturally just goes from a slope, so that on the higher side, it's gonna be like much shorter, if you know what I mean, like from the ground up, right? And it has these like, I don't know how to call them, like these beehive, shapes. And it kind of creates like a little entrance in front of it. So it felt fitting to make it so that it faces that tram station. And it serves as like an entrance into the beach area from this part. I wasn't exactly sure, and I'm not still sure, to be honest, if this place in the city is like a continuation of the downtown, if I'm going to continue with some super high density blocks, or if I'm just going to gradually already transition towards some sort of lower density areas with more open spaces between the buildings. Maybe that is actually going to be the theme of this place. So that Soho building is probably going to be the start of that, maybe. And it's, reasonably short for that purpose. And it's really going to blend in with the nature, as you will see, because we are going to add some really interesting details on the building itself. But anyway, that's kind of jumping ahead a bit too much. So this block that I'm doing right here with those blue buildings, that's already what I mentioned in that Bay episode, that I am going to put some buildings there. I was not sure which buildings. These kind of felt fitting. I experimented with some different ones as well. This really took a long time to choose that, but eventually these are looking really good. They absolutely stand out in this place because of the colors. That's kind of an important thing to also think about. And then I closed that block with this circular building, which I actually downloaded for Altengrad, because I believe it's the building from 1950s from Poland, or early 60s or something like that. But it kind of looks, timeless. So why not place it in Asturis as well? And it was a perfect match for this particular geometry. And as you can see, I was also able to cut this hole in the base of it for this tram. So this was a major headache to figure out how to make this tram just go through this block, and I eventually just made it go through the building because, why not? Because I can. So I had to do some details, obviously, around the portal to the entire underpass, and I really made sure that it is going to already look finished, even from the first-person perspective of the tram. So I don't need to do that later if I decide to do any kind of first-person rides. And I would really like to do first-person rides, especially here now that we are doing this very unique project for the trams on the beach. So this is that main road that I was talking about. I put it in a tunnel, obviously, because I already put buildings on top of it, so we had to go into a tunnel, and I really would like to have this area just a bit more walkable and make the roads in a bit more background, and in this particular case, underground. So it's only going to resurface some distance away from this area where there's going to be like an important intersection. You probably could have seen it in a time-lapse, actually. I just copied like one segment of the road and put it underneath those train tracks, right, in the background there, because I wanted to measure like how much elevation I can afford so that there's going to be another main road that is going to go perpendicular to the coastline, basically. And I just want to have it at the same elevation as that main road that resurfaces from the underground here. So that was just like a preparation, for some future projects that I already have in mind. So don't worry about that. We are obviously going to see that, don't worry. Now, that allowed me to define the shape of this entire hill above the beach, and I could do this landscaping, this like more final landscaping, so that I could start defining these like pedestrian roads and pedestrian paths on top of the hill. It was not exactly a very big hill, so I had to first use the terraforming networks to like flatten the places for the pedestrian paths, because I'm using the gravel paths. They obviously don't flatten terrain on themselves, on their own, which would have been fine. Obviously, functionality wise, it's no big deal, but the path would be like angled, like, along the width, right? Which is kind of looking terrible. So I did put those terraforming networks below them. Unfortunately, the terraforming networks are a bit too wide, as you can see, but that's going to be fine because we are just going to kind of remodel this entire slope with these rocks and just hide everything else with decals and, most importantly, trees and bushes. So it's really going to look fine. Right now, I was not exactly sure about it, but I should really remind myself that every time I do trees, places are just immediately going to kind of fix themselves, right? Another kind of a problem, potential big problem, as you can see, the sand on the map is not covering the gravel on the tracks, right? That is like a bit of a problem that I really needed to fix. So for this project, I downloaded the theme decals mod, which is kind of like ploppable asphalt, I suppose, but with decals. And, you are just going to have decals that share the same themes as whatever themes you have. So in this particular case, sand. And it does work perfectly. The decals, fortunately, in some cases, fortunately, in some cases, unfortunately, they kind of behave as procedural object decals. So they don't really have that fade in, fade out area, region, interval, let's say. So if you're just going to move them up and down with Move It, at some point they are just immediately going to start disappearing, right? They're just going to cut off. So you cannot really do these like faded, partially sandy areas. You kind of have to just rely on the natural way that the decal kind of disappears on the edges, but that's not really that important. The most important bit in here is that it covers the gravel of the tracks, and I can just do it in some places, more and less, so that we are not going to completely cover it with grass, or sorry, not grass, sand, because that would just look a bit too monotone, right? So we want to have as much detail as possible. But this was the most important thing. Obviously, adding trees, it immediately made this entire area kind of light up and liven up and add more colors, of course. So doing more of these green areas all around this place, because I really want to have this place looking very tropical. So lots of these open spaces I'm going to try to break up with some planters or bigger areas with grass and even some kind of rocks and all those kinds of details. I really want to have this place very, very natural. So also, that's the reason why I'm using the boardwalk as the platform next to the tram stations, because it looks very natural. It's like a very good combination with colors as well. This is probably the most important change to this entire area, and that is converting this Soho building so that it is going to look very green as well. All right, so not just the surfaces, but also the buildings. Otherwise, this building is very plain. It's pretty much the same color all around the place except the windows. And these kinds of like connecting places between the individual, towers of the building, they don't really have any purpose, do they? I could probably make them walkable or something, but why not just turn it into grass? That's just going to introduce the necessary color on the building, and it's going to, drive home that tropical feel a bit more. So, that's a great combination. And I also decided that I'm going to use these climbing vines, these two types of climbing vines here, and I'm just going to scale them up and down with procedural objects so I can get some variations. I think I also mirrored a couple of them so that, again, more variations, because otherwise it would be just a bit too obvious that I just copy-pasted pretty much one or two one or two model types, and it turned out looking really, really good. There are also going to be some, these ones, some smaller bushes on top of it, so that it just creates some more variations of greenery, and overall the building is just so much more interesting. We're also going to put some lights, night lights on it, so yeah, it's really going to stand out in this area. And I'm not exactly sure, but I'm probably going to choose the thumbnail picture where I'm showing this building from the top. I'm not exactly sure, but I probably did. Well, you will see that. Anyway, this is something that I kind of figured out now that I'm using the prop anarchy mod, you know, the new one, or well, these days it's not exactly that new, but anyway, it comes with the feature of being able to scale up and down props without converting them to procedural objects, right? That's the most important thing to add. And with these planters in particular, it's like a really interesting thing to experiment with, because as you can see, it adds just an interesting element. So you can even do that with those circular planters, you know, with those planters that kind of look like benches. They're supposed to be like benches, and you can create just interesting variations with only a single prop type, just like this. Also adding benches into that area, the ones that I'm using everywhere else for kind of continuity, and also we must not forget about the signs for the stops. Now this place was a bit too big, the boardwalk over here, so I decided to put this roof, this shelter, which also, you know, just put a different color into that area. So why not add that? Now, we return to that kind of like a boat marina area because we need to finish the surface that's just originating there and continuing all the way to that Soho building. And it's probably going to continue also inwards into this block as we continue it in some later episodes, later projects. So I just continued building or placing these decals in there, these decal surfaces, because I really like them. These are the Sydney Benelong Point decals. I'm not exactly sure what they're called in the workshop, but I probably mentioned that in previous videos as well. And this time I colored it the same color as on the other side of the bay, right? So I did not continue with that like a golden sandy color because that would be just a bit too large of a surface, and I wanted to have some contrast even with some buildings and this boardwalk, for example. So I chose this one. We don't have it anywhere else on this side of the bay, and again, it's like a continuity with some previously done areas, so that Asturis kind of looks a bit more uniform, but in kind of like a good way, you know? So, you know, that's just the reasoning behind it. Using these trees just because they have different colors compared to that surface, nothing more to that. Now, this is something that I don't think I've ever done in City Skylines, and that is doing this like a beach detailing. Yeah, I don't think I really did that because Asturis is my very first tropical city, even counting vanilla cities since I bought the game. So this was the first time, yeah. And so I used some of the, you know, umbrellas and all these chairs, even some vanilla ones, if I'm not mistaken. And I used quite generously the Parks People's generators in that area, as you could have seen. Now, the next step is, of course, to convert, or not convert, but make everything walkable, make sure that people can just use all these open surfaces, and it's going to look very much alive with all the pedestrians. So just making sure that the pedestrian paths go absolutely everywhere. There are so many options right now for people to just go around the area, and pedestrians in City Skylines fortunately do. So they do choose paths randomly. They don't just go along the shortest path, which is really nice. That basically allows the creation of these open spaces. And making sure that I'm connecting it even with the older places as well, so that Marina area and all of those networks that are coming over the bay, and also preparing some networks to go inside of these buildings, because the Soho building is going to also serve as like a connector between multiple levels, right? You could have seen me build that like upper level with those residential buildings, which is just like an indication that I put there to kind of remember the style that I want to have on that hill. So that Soho building is going to have all those paths kind of cross-connected through it, so people will actually use that main entrance to the building to go to the beach, to go to that tram stop, and there are going to be huge crowds of people when these places all around are finally going to be finished, right? I'm saying it all the time, but it is going to be like that. And I do believe that in the cinematics you will see that there already are some nice amounts of people, and we basically don't have anything around here. So, just imagine how it's going to look when we will. Now, these are the lights that I talked about. So I use these spotlights that I already used in the train station, I think. And I just made them. I made like multiple copies of them in one place so that they are going to be really bright. And they're just shining from those holes from inside of those towers, right? And it's looking really interesting from like lower angled shots. So, that's just something that I wanted to do there because I didn't really do it anywhere else in the city. I kind of didn't do any colors, I believe. I kind of went light with the colors, or, well, I didn't do any. So that's, not really necessary for the Soho building. I said that it's a bit too plain, but I don't really want to break those shapes with some kind of ads or some kind of, just abstract shapes or something like that. So I think that this cleaner look really benefits this building. We are definitely going to place some more of those colorful, kind of cyberpunky ads somewhere else in the city. So don't worry about that. That's not going to end just yet. Yeah, you can see those people. You can see all those people gathering all on the beach. So I suppose the park people's generators are the reasons that people are even using all those other pedestrian paths and connections and the tram stop right now. And yeah, this is the shot that I really, really like. This shot has all the colors, right? All the right colors. It has that gravel between the Soho buildings, towers, and that azure beach there in the center, or in the corner, sorry. With like a divider, which is the golden looking beach. Yeah, I really like that color contrast. And this Tokyo building here, the tower, that's something that's very necessary in this place. Some like a bigger building that's going to be the main focus on that building block, of that building block. That was very necessary. This is something that I used in the time lapse, or that I looked at in the time lapse a lot, this particular view, because I really wanted to have those residential buildings kind of tower over the beach, but I didn't want to have them at the beach themselves, right? So I wanted to create some sort of a division line between that and this like little rocky hill with those palm trees, the tropical trees. That's just absolutely perfect for that. So yeah, I'm really satisfied with that view. And there's obviously going to be more buildings behind that because we are not, in complete suburbs where we can afford to just end the city. So anyway, I think that's going to be almost it for today's episode. I think that in the next episode, we are most likely going to continue along the coastline some more, and we are going to take a look at that second tram station on the other side of this beach, where I would like to do maybe like a transfer station with some different lines and start maybe thinking about some, infrastructure changes around that part of the city. But, more on that in that episode. Thank you everyone for watching episode 14. I hope you liked it. If you did, then please don't forget to do the usual. That is putting thumbs up below the video, sharing it, leaving a comment, and subscribing if you are new here. Huge thanks to all the channel members, channel supporters who decided to directly support this channel. If you want to do that too, then you can do so through the join button or the link in the video description. Big thanks again, take care, and goodbye.